The woman had only said a few words as she passed by. The strongest knight of the Jingjiang Empire broke out in a cold sweat, because just half a month ago, the man was an ugly, weak vampire. Later, by drinking the blood of the king of the forest, he not only gained an extraordinary physique but also the ability to grow black forests on his skin to block sunlight. After drinking the blood of a lord-level boss, he gained the ability of disguise. With these two abilities, I could walk freely in human society, but this day, facing him on the street, I found someone who immediately recognized me as a vampire. Later, I learned that he was from the blood-drinking faction, a sect that specifically served vampires. He had come to find me after hearing about my investigation into the disappearance of the vampire. I then told him that he had also participated in the expedition before Clemma's disappearance. He needed supplies dropped by monsters, so he volunteered to join, but as everyone was about to enter the depths of the labyrinth, a violent earthquake suddenly began beneath their feet, followed by the collapse of the ground beneath them. Just as he was about to fall into the abyss, Clemma appeared in time, grabbed his arm, and in saving him, Clemma fell into the ground. Everyone except him assumed that Clemma's eagerness to succeed had led him to open the gate to the higher-level labyrinth without permission, causing the earthquake. So when he heard that Clemma's close friend was looking for him, he rushed over, only to find that I was actually a rare vampire. After hearing Noah's description, I realized it matched what Duke Ice had told me. This made me wonder, was Duke Ice lying? Or was someone behind it all? Then Noah said that in the instant the ground collapsed, he saw many eyes below. Hearing this, I asked him what they looked like, and he asked if I remembered the licenses distributed by the strange believers in the square. This reminded me that the paper did indeed have an eye icon on it. Meanwhile, in an underground church, many believers dressed in strange costumes were praying for the arrival of a savior, and on the platform lay a recently murdered body. Or perhaps, after the figure on the altar, offering corpses, finishes chanting an obscure incantation, reveals a sinister smile, and the scene shifts to the labyrinth entrance a few days later. As by CI tells me, the supply volunteers and Templars have all assembled. Hopefully, we're not going to bring back a corpse this time. But I suppose Klemer wasn't so easily killed. Actually, I've wanted to enter the labyrinth for a while, but now that I know Klemer's disappearance wasn't accidental, I must stay close to this person and monitor his movements. Just then, a group of people ran over, greeting me and introducing themselves as Templars from the monasteries under Evgorod. They said they were honored to travel with a legend like myself and greatly admired my willingness to go through fire and water for a friend. Finally, they said, "Let us fight side by side in the name of God." After they left, as Gates said, usually Templars only obey God's will. It's unusual for them today, showing interest in a knight. He suggested that I consider becoming a paladin in the future. Upon hearing this, Miriam and Sire Noah behind me nearly burst out laughing. They couldn't bear to imagine how ridiculous it would be to have a vampire as a paladin specifically tasked with hunting vampires. After getting ready, the group entered the labyrinth in a grand procession. Soon, our group arrived at a large hall in the middle section of the labyrinth. Miriam said, "This place is fantastic, even with so much water energy." I looked around and realized that, unlike the dungeon, this was an artificially designed space. It possessed the conditions necessary for a person to barely survive. Before I could finish thinking, Lugas stepped forward and said, "Isn't this an excellent hiding place?" He also praised me for being as powerful as rumored, noting that no one had died along the way. I didn't answer, but only asked how long it would take to reach Clemaine's missing place. Gates told me not to rush, and said I should trust Clemane, shouldn't I? The Evergrow family had mastered all the traps and mechanisms here. I said, "Even so, you still suffer casualties every time." To my surprise, Gates smiled wickedly and said those were merely offerings to the labyrinth, meant to pray for a safe exit. Hearing this, my heart skipped a beat. The next second, everyone saw fragments of stone falling from the ceiling of the hall, and the ground shook slightly. Seeing this, Gates quickly ordered, "Prepare yourselves. The labyrinth's layout is about to change." He then turned to me and told me that the wall structure could change at any moment, creating a shortcut to the upper level. As he finished speaking, the ground beneath our feet was shattered into countless pieces by a massive gear machine. Strangely, Gates and the others were slowly rising, while the ground beneath my feet was sinking. When the mechanical noise stopped, the shattered stone walls and ground returned to normal. However, we had no idea where we had been transported. It was clear from this that this wasn't a natural earthquake. Clemma had likely been tricked into this trap. Once the ground beneath our feet stabilized, the text abruptly ends here. Noah panicked and told me to look behind me. The moment I turned, I was stunned. I saw that Knight Clement was indeed trapped here, covered in wounds. Seeing this, I immediately stepped forward and leaped to his side. Checking his pulse, I knew he was still breathing, but extremely weak and needed immediate medical attention to save his life. Just then, Million came over and told me something was wrong. He said he had a deep feeling that something terrifying was beneath our feet. As soon as he finished speaking, a strong gust of wind blew from behind. We turned around and saw a pair of blood-red eyes appear out of nowhere within the black door. After that thing smashed through the wall and entered, we realized it was a minotaur, several meters tall. How could there be a minotaur in a place like Noah's Golden Hook? Without thinking, I told him to protect Clement, and then I drew my sword and charged towards the monster alone. Reaching its feet, I aimed for its head. I leaped forward, the hilt of my sword sizzling in my grip, but before I could even reach his neck, I was struck by a shockwave from his mouth. The aftershock not only sent me flying but also knocked Noah, who was still some distance away, off balance. Then the monster raised its weapon high. Although I already knew what it was going to do, I was powerless to stop it and could only watch helplessly as it slammed the weapon into the ground. The next second, countless cracks began to appear on the ground it had traversed. The cracks spread rapidly outwards from the center. Soon, the ground beneath Clemma collapsed. Seeing this, I didn't hesitate and flew downwards, but I was suddenly blocked by a magic circle halfway down. "The spell is powerful," Noah said. "Below is a minotaur, one of the most powerful monsters even among high-level monsters. Even vampires would be killed by it." Hearing his words, I bared my fangs in anger. How could I stand by and watch a swordsman die without offering my help? So I drew my long sword and pointed it at Selenoa, warning him that he had overstepped his bounds. Selenoa apologized, saying he couldn't just watch a vampire go to his death. He said if I really wanted to save Clementa, I needed to calm down and think things through. The chances of defeating the Minotaur by rushing in now were practically zero. After we got up there, we wondered if the Minotaur was really that big with its headed snake, or rather, this labyrinth. It even had monsters like the Minotaur. I thought we'd only encounter Cyclopes or something. Just as he finished speaking, the sound of gears turning came from the wall behind us again. Hearing the noise, we turned around and saw it was Gates. He said that he had underestimated Selenoa. He hadn't expected this girl to know earth magic. He had thought she was just a weirdo who could create and endure. Then I asked Sharp Noah if he didn't genuinely want to save Clemma, right? Before he could finish, I lunged forward and grabbed him by the neck, asking if he was the one who turned Clemma into this state. But here, as Gates said, "You only brought me here because I was so eager to see my best friend. You're much rougher than the rumors suggest," Knight Eugene said, grasping my wrist and slowly lifting my arm. Keep in mind, as a vampire, after consuming several wanderers, my strength was already 4 or 5 times that of an ordinary knight, yet this guy could lift my arm so easily. Sensing something was amiss, I immediately pulled off his glove. The next second, I saw a purple tattoo on the back of her hand. If it wasn't Sharp behind me, what was it that Noah could tell at a glance? I said, "I suppose that brute force just now wasn't your own, right, Sharp?" Noah explained that these patterns were generally used for power transmission. Originally, humans used them to pass on their power, but since someone began researching the use of these arrays to inherit non-human power, they were banned worldwide and became a forbidden art. Hearing this, Luggis laughed loudly, saying that was just a lie told by those who wanted to monopolize this power. He asked me, "Don't you understand? We are the ones chosen by God. When despair descends upon the world, we will be the survivors." I said, So you defeated Knight Clement with external power, and now you're trying to show off in front of me. But this time you're wrong. As I spoke, I charged towards him. When we collided, a powerful aura instantly swept through the entire hall, and I could feel the suction of this power. Noah thought, how can I, an ordinary vampire, be so powerful? How could Luggaz block my attack? I said first, it seems I'm not the only one hiding my strength. Then I turned and elbowed me away, simultaneously thrusting a palm towards my abdomen. Just as I was being knocked back and hadn't even landed, he swiftly shifted positions and stroked a floorboard. The next second, the floor beneath my and Silenoa's feet reopened, anticipating our descent into the abyss. He stood there, laughing triumphantly. But the next second, with a shout from me, Silenoa released another magic circle, conjuring a plane in midair. Using this plane without applying force, I leaped up and arrived before the wall closed, aiming my arrows at his head. However, due to the closing of the 10-pointed starboard, my arrows missed by 2.5 centimeters, only grazing his cheek. Immediately afterward, my long sword was snapped in two by the heavy stone wall mechanism. He had heard I was strong before, but he hadn't expected me to be this strong. If he were to fight me head-on, he knew he wouldn't be a match for me. He was glad he had kept the claima. The application of it was irrelevant now because the final sacrifice had been offered. On our way down, Noah cast several spells, finally landing safely on the ground. As soon as I landed, I rushed forward without looking back, leaving a disheveled Noah behind. Noah asked where I was going, and seeing I ignored him, he grumbled as he followed. When he caught up, he saw me carrying the unconscious Knight Clima and asked if I could save him. This put Noah in a difficult position, because he wasn't skilled in healing magic. I said that wasn't the answer I wanted. Hearing this, Noah's lips curled into a sneer, unsure what to say, finally only saying he would try his best. At this moment, Milion came over and said he had searched the area and there was no exit. I asked him if there were any thin walls we could break through. Milion said that this seemed to be the deepest part of the maze, a completely enclosed boss room. Most importantly, he had initially thought he could control the abundant water energy here. But just now, she was surprised to find that, as a water spirit, she couldn't control these water creatures, especially the strange pool of blood on the ground. After listening to his explanation, I looked around and saw eyes everywhere on the walls. I thought to myself that these were the things that Silenoa had seen before. I then asked Miriam, "Can't you even control this blood?" Miriam said that, in principle, he could only control the blood of kings. Now that he couldn't control this, it meant that the owner of this blood was still alive. Just then, a splash of water suddenly rose not far away, followed by a large creature slowly rising from the pool of blood. Only after its entire body emerged did I realize that it was still a minotaur. Silenoa, seeing this, instantly broke out in a cold sweat. I turned to tell him not to panic and to continue focusing on healing Biclama. At the same time, I told Miriam to quickly find another exit. In the meantime, I had to restrain this monster. It tried to grab me by the severed arm and charged towards it. The minotaur lunged at me, raising its claws. I managed to dodge the first few attacks with my agility, but its speed increased exponentially. Finally, in another unavoidable attack, I could only raise my sword to parry. With a sharp clang, my sword, which had been broken in two, was now reduced to just the hilt. The minotaur retracted its claws and opened its mouth wide, gathering intense heat. Seeing this, I quickly flipped backward to avoid the attack, but before I landed, it shot at me again. This time, I didn't have time to flip again and could only duck to dodge. As soon as I landed, I quickly created distance between us. Looking at the broken sword in my hand, I thought that ordinary weapons wouldn't harm it. Since that was the case, I'd have to make do with this for now. I tried to gather blood from my wrist onto the broken sword, forming a short dagger, and then leaped towards its head again, unleashing a slash at its body. Unexpectedly, even this failed to cut his skin. Instead, he found my opening. With a light swing of his weapon, he sent me flying dozens of meters, crashing into the stone wall before falling to the ground. Only Moxilin Noah breathed a sigh of relief, but all he could do now was increase the intensity of his healing spells, hoping that Clemma might wake up and help me. It was only after I rose from the ruins that I understood. Why had Moxilin Noah been urging me to leave? It turned out this monster was on a completely different level from ordinary high-level monsters. Before I could even think about playing around, I suddenly saw him swing his arm towards the sharp Noah beside him, and instantly a dozen sharp spikes flew towards them at incredible speed. Seeing the situation was dire, I didn't have time to think. I immediately flashed in front of them, using my body to block the attack. Looking at the invincible monster before me, and hearing the shouts of my teammates behind me, a profound sense of powerlessness instantly overwhelmed me. This feeling was something I experienced almost daily in my previous life, something I should have been intimately familiar with. But why was this feeling so much stronger now than ever before? Just as I was about to, unable to dodge, the monster approached me and summoned several sharp spikes that pierced my entire body. Finally, my strength gave out, and I collapsed into a pool of blood. Before losing consciousness, I looked behind me and saw Clemma lying on the rock. Just then, Clemma finally regained consciousness and opened his eyes. When he saw my current state, his pupils dilated instantly. Noah, standing nearby, didn't notice the awakened Clemma. Looking at the current situation, he was utterly devastated. There was no way to fight, no escape, and we were surrounded. Finally, he squeezed out a few tears and cried out, "I'm sorry, Master. This unfilial disciple must go first." Just then, accompanied by a violent cough, Clemma rolled over and looked at my mangled body. He said, "I didn't expect to get dragged into this too." "Sharp," Noah said. "It's almost our turn. We'll try to escape." "No way," Clemma said. "That trash Gates actually used me as bait to lure Eugene Knight into a landslide. Actually, that guy had his eye on Eugene Knight from the beginning. It's all my fault. I went around bragging about being close friends with Eugene Knight, which dragged her into this mess. Ultimately, it's all my fault for being too weak." Although we only had a few days together, he was impressed by my formidable strength and unwavering sense of justice. So he didn't want to miss out. He kept trying to build a connection with me, wanting to stand shoulder to shoulder with a true powerhouse like me. But now it seems it's all too late. Seeing the spikes flying towards him from afar, Clemma shoved Noah aside and said, "If he ever comes to the ecosystem, he must become my heir." The next second, the image of him being pierced through appeared before my eyes. At that moment, I mobilized all the blood in my body, raising my hand to remove all the spikes from my body. With a burst of red light shooting into the sky, my wounds began to heal at a visible speed. The monster realized something was wrong and turned its head, only to have its arms severed by a red laser. The laser beam struck a stone pillar behind it, revealing my image. However, I had completely changed, my body now covered in black scales. Noah quickly noticed that the surrounding blood was actually following my pulse. This instantly made him realize that I might not be an ordinary vampire, and that he might witness history that day. Just as he was in shock, the monster swung its massive sword and lunged at me. Instead of retreating, I charged towards it. During my leap, the black scales covered my entire body. Simultaneously, a red orb condensed in my palm, and as I descended like a black lightning bolt, the Minotaur was cleaved in two. Immediately afterward, the level of blood in the room began to drop rapidly. The surrounding eyes flashed red, and the monster that had been split in two began to regenerate in just 2 seconds. His time had completely healed, which shocked Selenoa. She also realized that the labyrinth seemed to be made of writing materials. Realizing something was wrong, I leaped forward and kicked the eyes around the room. Selenoa noticed that these eyes bled. After smashing one eye, I dodged the monster's attack and landed, then rushed to the side and smashed another eye. As I smashed the surrounding eyes in quick succession, the monster seemed to suffer immense pain. Yes, a violent roar was heard. The Minotaur's body had clearly recovered, but I felt his life force slowly fading. This discovery made me realize that the master of this labyrinth was not the Minotaur. Recalling this place, There was the labyrinth environment created to allow humanity to survive for a long time, and the continuous disappearances over the years. Could the entire labyrinth be something that people like Gates offered sacrifices to and worshipped? At this moment, the labyrinth was surrounded by heretics led by Gates, who kept chanting. Seeing the words of the Redeemer descending quickly, the path ahead, upon witnessing the intense energy fluctuations within the labyrinth, Gates could barely contain her joy. In her heart, she cried out, "Gods, please unleash even more frenzied chaos. Now that I have opened your eyes, it is your turn to heed my prayers." The Minotaur, within the labyrinth, discovered that the pool of blood on the ground had been completely absorbed within mere seconds. The two spheres in the center of the room began to levitate and spin rapidly in midair. After all the blood had converged within them, one slowly opened an eye. As that illusory eye entered the Minotaur's body, he gained a physical form. The Minotaur's consciousness was instantly controlled by the eye. Then, he flapped his wings violently, smashing a hole in the ceiling and fleeing towards the outside world. It was unheard of for a high-level monster to escape from a dungeon, especially since a town was not far from the labyrinth. Million flew back excitedly, saying he had found an exit, allowing him to look up at the ceiling. Upon discovering that the hole led directly to the outside world, he was utterly stunned. Seeing the labyrinth about to collapse, Miriam urged me to get out quickly, but I ignored him and slowly walked towards the dying Clementine. Noah, noticing my sharp, forlorn expression, wondered, "Am I, a vampire, grieving for a human?" He already found it unbelievable that I had concealed my identity and infiltrated human society, posing as a knight. Then he discovered my extraordinary bloodline, and now I was grieving for a human. Before even finding Clementine, I bared my fangs. After piercing his skin, I began injecting vampire blood into his veins.